So, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. How sweet and fitting it is to die for one's own country. The words of the Roman poet Horace. Words that were later heavily criticized by the wartime poet Wilfred Owen. You see, to Owen, the altruistic behaviors of war were nothing more than an exercise in futility. Well, are they? Is altruism itself just an exercise in futility? Well, that's a question that I will leave for you, but I hope my presentation can provide you with some perspective. Now, before we move on, we must first define what altruism is. We shall say that altruism is the performance of behaviors that benefit others at one's own detriment, at the detriment of one's own Darwinian fitness. Now, with that definition comes certain questions. The first one being, is altruism a pervasive trait? Is it a trait that we see amongst many organisms? Is it a heritable trait? Is it passed on from generation to generation? And if so, is it subject to the same laws of natural selection? Now, if the answer to all of these questions is yes, which it is, I only really have one more statement to make. Wait for it, wait for it. No, seriously, how could a trait like this continue to exist? In order to understand this problem a little better, let's consider the following hypothetical. Now imagine that there existed some gene. We'll call this gene gene A. Now gene A causes the individual who possesses this gene to sacrifice themselves for the sake of others during an attack by a predator. Now, in this particular case, there's only one individual with gene A. Now, in comes the predator, fa la 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 la. The individual sacrifices themselves. Now, note something very interesting here. Not only does the individual die in this case, but their copy of gene A gets deleted completely, right? Natural selection would predict that if this keeps going on, gene A will completely disappear from the population. But that's not what we see. We see altruistic traits persisting on. How do we overcome this problem? How do we overcome this dichotomy? The solution actually comes to us via this man, W.D. Hamilton, in his rule, Hamilton's rule. In order to understand this rule better, let's go back to our original hypothetical. Now, imagine we changed gene A just a little bit. We tweaked it just a little bit. Now, those possessing gene A in this case will only sacrifice themselves for the sake of others who also have gene A. So even in this case, with a predator and a self-sacrifice and the subsequent loss of that gene copy, there's still multiple copies of gene A that are left for every instance of sacrifice. Therefore, what we're learning here from Hamilton's rule is that in order for an altruistic gene, whatever that is, to persist, there must be the cost, which in this case is the loss of one's genes, has to be outweighed by the benefits of having genes similar to yours being passed on instead. And so what we can predict ultimately is that altruism is most likely to emerge in a population of individuals who are closely related to each other. Now, you're probably seeing the presentation and saying, man, nice presentation, but cool story, bro. Where's your empirical evidence? Well, let's look at some bugs. Specifically, let's look at the bugs of the order Hymenoptera. Now, you'll notice something very interesting about the first three bugs. They actually live in colonies of individuals who are highly related. And the last one, the softfly, does not. Now, in which species do we see altruism? Surprise, surprise. In the species in which we have high degree of relatedness. In the wasp, the bee, and the termite, we see a high degree of eusociality and altruism, but we do not in the softfly, just as Hamilton would have predicted. Now, let's go back to our original question. Altruism, yay or nay? Is it just an exercise in futility? That's still quite a hard question to answer. But we can say this, that given the proper context, altruism will not only emerge, it'll become evolutionarily adaptive. And some might say that altruism's true beauty comes in its ability to endure its own sacrifice. Thank you.